Welcome to Convention Reviews. Today we'll be talking about Ichibancon 2026. This is an annual anime convention that occurs in the Concord Convention Center in Concord, North Carolina. And this year was a little unique due to the fact that they had to actually change the date from traditionally January to February due to the event center having a massive renovation, which ended up causing some delays, but overall had a really great final product throughout the event. It was very fresh and revitalized, the event center, which really looked pretty nice. Everything from the furniture, carpets, as well as some of the layout definitely got a massive upgrade, which definitely seems like it's a much more modern convention center compared to what it was before. The event itself had a lot of its traditional settings over the last several years, with a couple of its inflatable blow-ups, a pretty nice little manga library if you're trying to just have like a cool-down area, as well as a really nice arcade sponsored by Snow Phoenix. I personally have considered this arcade to be a really nice addition to this particular event center because it has a really great collection of both old and new video games spanning the decades, as well as many of the newer, more interesting rhythm games. I know the Taiko drum set was very popular throughout this event. And, one thing I will say I like about this too is that they also have some nice prize catchers, and it's really a really fun place to hang out if you're between panels or just trying to find something to do, which is a great way to kill time. Another interesting aspect of Ichibancon is the Itasha Car Show. This is a really interesting collection of individuals who bring in their cars that are wrapped in various anime and video game characters from various different franchises, from more recent hits to classics from a couple of years ago, if not a decade plus. There is a relatively notable Itasha car collector community here in the western part of the state, and I will say I've seen some of these vehicles at some other events, which is pretty fun to see. It's also interesting to see a lot of the variation in which the owners also, do to their vehicles over time as well, whether it's adding, interesting little stickers and pieces on to the windows and roof racks. There was a really interesting Bleach car that had a lot of the signatures from the various voice actors and the cast, which, was a really interesting case to kind of have your vehicle. Probably one of my interesting cases of ones I ran across that was new to this year was somebody had a wrap of a Sonic character, Rouge the Bat, as well as a Jolene Cujo Stone Ocean Tasha wrap, which was also pretty fun to say the least as well. It's always fun to find out what the new wrap is going to be at these events because you never know what's going to show up. I will say I hope these events continue to grow bigger over time with the Natasha cars and more people get into the hobby. Another returning artist to this particular event were the Chalk Twins. This is a really unique little booth that basically they do a live drawing over the entirety of the convention event, where they typically do a very popular show or series, and it's really kind of fun to watch it get filled in. I particularly was only here for a Saturday and Sunday, but really interesting to see some interesting art, especially considering they have like a little fun draw wall to go on as well. In terms of main panel content, the panelists throughout the at least Saturday, Sunday weekend was interesting to say the least. There certainly were some interesting titles for me that were a little more eye-catching. They had some that involved sort of talking about the early era of Pokemon, as well as some interesting individuals that talked about Lego stop motion, as well as some early Looney Tunes stuff that was pretty interesting to say the least. One of the featured panelists who comes here almost every year is Samurai Dan. He is a skilled martial artist who is really in a lot of different various fields of weaponry, but he also has some fun panels too, he brings in his Akita, which is an unusual brand to say the least, and he's always a fun panelist to always see at these things and watch his workshops. One of the more interesting panels I ran across was somebody who did an Uma Musume panel, which really got the attendees really riled up, which was really fun considering it's become a very popular game in the last couple of years. There also was another panelist who did video games from 2006 or from 20 years ago, which really kind of covered a lot of interesting aspects of not only just the console wars and other aspects, which was pretty fun as well. Though there were some really interesting panels throughout the weekend, I will say that the selection definitely had a lot of repeats from previous years, which for attendees who come back, it can be a little bit stale in some regards, but definitely there's enough here to kind of, find other options, at least on a Friday and Saturday. By Sunday, things tend to be kind of wrapping up for the most most part, with a little bit more minimal selection, mostly kind of getting your final time to get around the dealer's hall. In terms of cosplay, there definitely were a lot of people having fun over the weekend. I will say there were some really fun ones I did run across, especially considering I saw a couple of Gachita Kuda, legit trash cosplays, which is probably the first time I've seen them in the wild, as well as some other impressive ones. I will say, though, this also happened over the weekend of KatsuCon, which is a really large cosplay convention in Washington, D.C., so there's probably a good chance that many of the cosplayers kind of got pulled to a different area for this weekend. In terms of concerts, there were two particular acts over the weekend. One was the band Kazaa, who has been performing with Nostalgia Cons and Triad, among many others, for the last several years. Definitely after seeing them multiple years in a row, it's starting to get maybe a little long in the tooth. The other artists invited to the event was Caleb Hales and Jonathan Young, who are really interesting kind of YouTube artists who kind of sprung into sort of the fandom that way. And, they really performed a really fun assortment of, anime, Disney, and other songs, kind of like remixing them together, which really kind of got the crowd pumping and definitely was kind of a breath of fresh air in a lot of ways for more interesting kind of live content at this event. On Sunday, the convention holds an otaku flea market, which allows people to sell some of their old otaku-related merch while they're kind of breaking down sets, which is kind of a good use of a space and kind of a fun garage sale to end the weekend. Though I do have some criticisms, I do think this is still a pretty good event, especially if this is your local con or maybe your first con experience. There definitely seems to be a little bit of everything here. I would say that I was mostly satisfied with my Saturday-Sunday weekend pass and pretty much saw everything I wanted to see over this weekend as well. And if you went to this convention too, let me know, and hopefully I'll see you on the next convention review.